Okay, we're all set to go nowhere.
I am sentencing you to 3 months house arrest, Mr. Brecht.
Disturbia is a perfect time capsule of what the mid-2000s looked and felt like for teenagers of that time. You have the humor, the romance, the dated technology.
Back off! All right, I'll throw this where you can't fall.
Okay, just relax, okay? That's 60 gigs of my life.
Even better.
And it's all neatly packaged in about an hour-and-a-half movie. Oh, its basic premise is about how a serial killer might be living next door to our protagonist.
You're not the only one who's watching.
I'll cover everything. Let me start from the beginning.
6 weeks sitting in a 2-room apartment with nothing to do but look out the window at the neighbors.
Disturbia is a modern reimagining of sorts of the Alfred Hitchcock classic Rear Window. While recovering from a broken leg, the protagonist, Jeff, played by James Stewart, is confined to a wheelchair in his apartment. He starts watching his neighbors through his rear window to help pass the time, and finds himself strangely entertained as he watches other folks' drama unfold. Things go from fun reality TV without the TV to a thriller mystery when Jeff thinks he witnesses a murder. Jeff spends most of the movie trying to make sense of what he thinks he saw with the limited resources a man trapped inside his own apartment has available. Rear Window is considered to be one of the all-time greats in cinema. A remake was made in the 90s starring Christopher Reeves, and unfortunately, it did not live up to the standards set by the original. Sometime later, Steven Spielberg has a script for Disturbia. He asks director DJ Caruso to direct, and arranges for Shia LaBeouf to be on a casting shortlist to star in it. While most people probably attribute Transformers as Shia's breakthrough role, I'd argue it's actually this movie. Prior to this, he was known as Ren's goofy kid brother on Disney Channel, showing some promise from his performance in Holes. Disturbia kind of brought him from former Disney Channel star to a potential leading man in Hollywood, with a pretty impressive box office return from his first major outing to back it up. Now, the difference between Rear Window and Disturbia is that it's told from the perspective of a mid-2000s teenager on house arrest, rather than a grown man from the 50s. Director DJ Caruso wanted to take an unusual approach when crafting this thriller. He took influences from a John Cusack-style romance, like Say Anything, a John Hughes-style comedy, like The Breakfast Club, with a bit of teen angst sprinkled in like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, blending all these genres together to create this thriller horror-style movie.
You think he sees us?
No, he can't see us. But trust me, he can feel us watching.
The opening is a complete misdirection with its use of eerie music, coupled with the misleading first line. This scene and the one that follows is the perfect setup to get the premise in motion, as well as giving the audience a reason to feel sympathy for our main character, Cale. While fairly short, this fishing trip establishes the father-son relationship Cale has with his dad, and makes what follows that much more heartbreaking.
Are you okay? Gil!
When Cale goes to check on his father after the accident, I appreciate that they only show us Cale's reaction rather than showing us what he sees. His face already says it all. No need to show us more. That scene is important because it helps bring the audience to Cale's side right from the start, while also bringing us closer for the reason he gets sentenced to house arrest in the first place. So when he whacks his teacher in the next scene for saying this,
"Give me one good reason why I shouldn't fail you right now. What would your father think?"
Cale is a much more sympathetic character despite his violent reaction, because as an audience we were given context to understand his trauma. We would lose all of that without the intro. House arrest puts Cale in a similar situation to Jeff from Rear Window. He takes it in stride at first. He plays video games, listens to music with iTunes, and generally just goofs off all day. Which may sound good in theory, but gets old rather quickly. Especially when his mom, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, begins to have enough of his lazy behavior.
Look, Cale, I'm sorry you're a felon, but this is not a vacation.
The small scope of Cale's world becomes abundantly clear after the neighborhood kids play a prank on him and he leaves the house boundaries set by his ankle monitor. He gets humiliated by the police officer on the scene, who has a personal vendetta against Cale because he's the cousin of the teacher he punched. His humiliation is within the front view of his new neighbor Ashley, the girl next door. Accepting his new spatially challenged fate, Cale's world expands when he realizes the entertainment valley just outside his window. With binoculars in hand, he gladly shares his findings with his best friend, Ronnie.
These are just simple observations, natural side effects of chronic boredom. Find your passion, Cale.
Every window is a different channel. You have reality TV in one window, a comedy in another, a potential horror in the back, more on him later, and Kale's favorite window, The Girl Next Door. There's an underlying missing person mystery going on in the news, and Kale can be seen partially paying attention to it a few times, but who cares about that when you have entertaining neighbors to watch instead? But then Kale notices that his neighbor, Mr. Turner, owns a car suspiciously similar to the missing persons case in the news. He and Ronnie put together that the current mystery is eerily similar to several murder kidnappings and other unsolved cases.
Several murder kidnappings in Austin.
But that all gets pushed aside when he and Ronnie get distracted by Ashley next door. The funny thing is, Kale's room is just a soundstage, so whenever an actor is looking outside the window, they're actually looking at nothing and acting in accordance with the director and the screenplay. The same can be said when the boys get caught and Ashley looks up at them. Their reaction to being caught is also pretty funny.
You're a jackass. You are a genuine jackass.
There's no way she heard that.
I promise you, she heard. My deaf aunt and I'm hard.
No. The romantic element of this movie begins when Ashley decides to join Kale in his stakeout of Mr. Turner. Initially, Kale's attraction to her was purely superficial, but when the walls come down a bit after spending some time together, it's revealed that they do have some things in common outside of enjoying spying on their neighbor together. Kale has trauma from losing his father, and this event created a bit of a rift between him and his mom, with him seemingly struggling more with his grief. Ashley's problems revolve around her parents forcing her to move due to their own drama, and her dad dumping their baggage onto her. Both Ashley and Kale are just teens trying to find their place in the world. They both look outside their windows, wanting to understand how they fit into it all. And in unlikely circumstances, they find comfort within each other. My main problem with the romantic subplot is Kale's confession. It doesn't hold up too well under scrutiny. When she confronts him about sabotaging her party, he admits that he's been watching all of the neighbors, her included. That wouldn't go over as well as the movie makes it seem. But when you have actors that have good romantic chemistry, they can elevate weaker parts of a screenplay and have an audience still root for them, regardless of the quality of the writing. When the chemistry just isn't there between two actors, it will never work, even within a good story. That being said, I do believe that Shia and Sarah Roma put in a solid performance and have good chemistry with one another. I love the subtle blink and you'll miss it moments too, like Kale reaching for Ashley's hand when he walks her home, but falls short because he's a nervous teenager. Or his reaction to when he notices her using his binoculars. There's something very endearing when the person you're into starts picking up your little habits and manner of doing things. These details are subtle, but potent. Kale's confession, while flawed, is sincere and heartfelt, as he reveals that he's seen the part of her that's even hard for her own eyes to see. There's more to her than meets the eye, and he can see that.
Stupid. That was a stupid line. Somewhere to meet the eye with you. Stupid.
Definitely unrealistic, but I appreciate Ashley's mixed response.
That's either the creepiest or the sweetest thing I've ever heard.
Don't worry, I was just kidding. And with this, we're led nicely into the horror elements of this movie. Among all subgenres of horror, a bit of a pet peeve I sometimes have is when the characters are a little too dumb, or lack some kind of self-awareness. Like, oh no, our friend has mysteriously disappeared. Let's not look for them or be suspicious at all. It sometimes feels like the reason some of these movies reach its feature-length runtime are due to dumb characters. To be clear, character flaws are a very good thing. It's perfectly reasonable for people under distress to not always make the best decisions, and it also makes them more relatable to an audience. But there's a limit. The 2009 remake of The Stepfather, a movie that came out during a similar time period as Disturbia, had the same budget, and also has a teen protagonist who happens to live near a serial killer, has characters that are just frustrating to watch. The Stepfather makes so many mistakes that should have exposed him much sooner. Like, this guy is really sloppy, yet the main character never does anything about it until the end of the movie, despite being somewhat suspicious of him the entire time. He slips and reveals something suspicious. The main character just shrugs it off. He attacks someone downstairs. He shrugs that off too. He hears disturbing noises in the basement. He shrugs it off. It's really hard to root for someone when they're being this dense. In the original Stepfather, the main character Stephanie is actually smart. She can sense something is off with her stepfather for a decent portion of the movie and actively takes action to uncover the truth. The reason why he's been able to get away with his insidious deeds for as long as he has is because he is smart as well. He takes actions into manipulating her into trusting him. Having them both be competent creates an interesting dynamic between the leads and elevates the tension for the audience. We want Stephanie to figure things out before it's too late, but at the same time, we're able to see her stepfather as a worthy threat. Now is a good time to properly introduce Mr. Turner, played by David Morse. Like the stepfather, Mr. Turner is a serial killer hiding in plain sight with a similar pattern of behavior of what you might expect of a Dexter-type villain. Further research revealed that the current missing person case is eerily similar to previous unsolved murder kidnappings involving redheads in another state a few years prior. During the first stakeout, sure enough, they watched Turner bring home a woman with red hair. Not damning enough on its own, but enough to ring some alarm bells. It's fun in-game spying them at first until a little later when Kale's now alone. He witnesses the same woman trying to escape Turner's house in a panic. Kale is unable to get a good recording of what's going on and gets caught snooping in the process. Afterwards, he sees someone leave, presumably the same woman, get in her car, and calmly drive away, leaving him uncertain of what he thinks he just witnessed.
Kale, what is happening? Talk to me, man. She's the redhead. She's leaving the house.
You are seriously losing it, you know that? You gotta stop this, alright, Kale? Kale?
In some kind of power move, Turner shows up in Kale's house the next morning, after helping his mom after she supposedly got a flat tire while shopping. Turner acts friendly towards Kale, learns about his house arrest, hits on his mom, and even sympathizes with him in a sinister way.
Listen, I get it. I went to school. There were plenty of teachers I wanted to just kill.
What I believe what makes Mr. Turner scary is his realism. Personally, my biggest fears are probably supernatural or things that can't be properly explained. But those experiences aren't something that someone encounters every day, or in most cases at all. What I think resonated with fans of movies like The Strangers is that people like the stalkers can exist in reality, and their victims could be anyone, anywhere. You're more likely to run into stalkers like The Strangers or Mr. Turner than a ghost or a monster. David Morse puts in just the right amount of creepy in his performance. This can be seen especially well when he confronts Ashley for following him. This was his first day of shooting, and he was right on it right from the start.
What are you doing?
Well, I'm officially welcoming you to the neighborhood. I know that you've been following me. Don't deny it.
He's also pretty good at staying a step ahead of everyone in most of the movie, despite even Caleb being pretty savvy himself. Ronnie gets trapped in Turner's garage when he sneaks in looking for the body bag Ashley saw him bring in the night of her party. Kale, without hesitation, violates his house arrest again by coming to Ronnie's rescue. The police arrive and have Kale on a second house arrest violation and allegedly breaking and entering. To make matters worse, Ronnie is nowhere to be found. Kale's only hope is that they listen to him and search the body bags in his garage, which actually turns out to be a trap. The body bags in his garage? It's just some deer he hit. He wasn't being sloppy when they caught him earlier. Fearing the worst, Kale's mom goes to talk to Turner to prevent him from potentially pressing charges on Kale. Against his wishes, of course. Ronnie missing was just a fake out, and he managed to escape Turner's garage by going through his house. Kale begins to think he might be wrong about everything until he watches Ronnie's footage of his escape. The final act turns into somewhat of a mild slasher. I wish it could have gone a tad bit further with an R rating, but it does manage pretty well with what they're able to get away with. Mr. Turner takes out Kale's mom, Ronnie, and keeps Kale from escaping his own home to prevent triggering his ankle monitor. Realizing the evidence that Ronnie found in his house is pretty damning, he finally lets the mask slip and devises a plan to take care of everything.
And now we gotta bring your mom over here so you can slit her throat. Because she just wouldn't stop blaming you for killing your dad.
Turner may not be like most masked horror villains, but he definitely wears a mask. Someone like Jason or Michael Myers would only fit in a Halloween-like scenario. Literally. The mask Turner wears is similar to one of Jerry from The Stepfather. The mask of a good father or neighbor. And not only until he's pushed off the edge will it slip. I like how Ashley isn't a damsel in distress and is the one to find and save Kale, and Kale breaks into Turner's house in order to save his mom. He finds a secret room that seems reminiscent of a killer room from Dexter. There's some disturbing set design details in the background where you can see where Mr. Turner keeps trophies of his victims, such as their IDs, car keys, and other personal items. On the outside, Mr. Turner seems to be so neat and organized until you see what he has hidden underneath the surface, which is just a bona fide house of horrors with his victim's body stored all over the place. In the final confrontation, Kale and his mom are able to take him down. I find it very satisfying that Turner goes down relatively easily after taking a few bad hits. At the end of the day, he's just a guy. I find it so annoying when other slasher villains can take multiple fatal injuries without consequences. While I do like some ambiguity and dark endings from time to time in horror, it is nice to get a pure happy ending. For the most part, that's exactly what Disturbia delivers. Suburbia is saved, Kale gets off house arrest for good behavior, he gets a girl, and Ronnie predicts that this video will go viral and be shared with other folks who remember this, in my opinion, underrated movie.
Soon to be the most popular video on YouTube.
We hope.